going on, everyone? Welcome to the newest episode of the Believe in Oregon podcast. I'm riding solo today. I had a couple of guests that were gonna come on the show. They ended up falling through though. So, actually, just one second. We got a good show for you today. A very solid win at the Big House for the Ducks. You never leave Ann Arbor with a win and feel bad about it. So, kudos to the Ducks. They were definitely prepared for this one. They came ready to play and they got the job done. It was an impressive, I think, 38-17 win. They covered the spread, got a late touchdown to cover the spread. So I know that there were some gamblers out there that were definitely happy about that. We got really good games from Dillon, Gabriel, and Traeshon Holden. Pretty solid performance from the defense. There's definitely some things to clean up on that side of the ball, if we're being honest. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but all in all, a little bit of a downer on the injury front. You feel good about a win in the Big House, but I think this game's going to be remembered for what happened, to Tez Johnson and then Marcus Harper at the end of the game. We'll talk about that also in a second. We don't know the long-term outcomes yet for Tez Johnson and Harper. But I think we'll probably learn more in the coming days. But again, I'll talk about that in a second. More third quarter struggles for this team than I think we were hoping to see. I know that's something that we've seen a lot so far this year. At some point, they're hopefully going to get that cleaned up. But ultimately, it was a victory. So we're going to get into all of that. But I want to highlight some standout players as well. And then we're going to look ahead to see what's next for Oregon. Let's start with the injury news, though. It started out early with the Ducks. On the first drive, Tez Johnson went down. It appeared that he was kind of holding his shoulder/collarbone injury. It didn't seem like he was in a ton of pain coming off the field. I mean, it looked like he got nicked up, but there's been speculation that he broke his collarbone or something. We'll talk about the CBS report in just a second. But when you get a collarbone break, you're usually in a ton of pain. He didn't seem to be in a lot of pain, so we ran to the sideline, went to the medical tent for a couple of minutes, went back into the locker room, came back in the second quarter in street clothes on the sideline. That's when the CBS broadcast came out and said that he was done for the day. They speculated that it was a separated shoulder or something to do with this collarbone, like a fractured clavicle or broken collarbone, something of that sort. All of that is obviously speculation. We don't really know exactly what it is. If those are the two options right now, I think as an Oregon fan, you take the separated shoulder, because that would be a much quicker recovery time period than a broken clavicle. Separated shoulder is usually around 2, 3, 4 weeks on average. Sometimes worse, sometimes better. I mean, there's some people who have separated shoulder, dislocated shoulder, that can come back and play right away. But broken clavicle, broken collarbone, that takes a lot longer to heal. Sometimes that's as many as 6 to 8 to 10 weeks. So if it ends up being that, it could potentially be a season ender for Tez Johnson. We don't know at this time. So looking at depth, this is probably one of the positions on the team that you could sustain an injury of this sort. Obviously, you don't want to with Tez Johnson. He's the best player on your offense, best receiver in that receiver room. So, but that is a place where they've got other guys that can step up. Traeshon Holden, Evan Stewart, Justice Lowe. They've played really well today. They've stepped up in a big way. And then you look at, pass catchers in general. Terrence Ferguson and Kenyon Sadiq also did a really good job in that position. So, but looking forward, missing Dillon Gabriel's number one target for whatever amount of time is not something you want. It's just not great. So we'll hopefully learn more on Monday night, maybe. When we talk to Dan Lanning, I don't really know what he is, what he's going to say about it. It feels like this is probably one that he might hold a little bit closer to the vest than others. So we'll learn more about Tez then, hopefully, and go from there. Marcus Harper, he seemed to hurt his knee in the fourth quarter. It was tough. I didn't get a really good look at the injury. I'm going to rewatch the game tomorrow morning and hopefully see a little bit better. But he went to the medical tent, came out with ice on his knee, and had it wrapped, did not return to the game. Dan Lanning said after the game that he had talked to Harper in the locker room, and Harper said that he'd be good to go. But they said that they would, monitor that going forward, and we'll see, what the fallout is from that. But seems to be a little bit more positive on that injury front, if you're looking at that and the Tez Johnson injury. Good news on the injury front. Both Terrence Ferguson and Jordan Birch did play in this game. They both played pretty well in this game. Ferguson had 2 catches for 34 yards, almost a touchdown. He got down on the 1-yard line. And then Jordan Birch had 3 tackles and half of a tackle for loss. So I personally did not expect either of them to play in this game. I knew they traveled, but I was told that it would probably be more likely that they return to the field next week instead of this week, just to give them an extra week of rest. But they both got on the field and played. I don't know the snap counts. Obviously, those will come out tomorrow on PFF. So I'm curious to see how much they actually played compared to the normal workload. But good to see them back out there, back healthy. They should only get healthier from here. So that's a really good development from the Ducks. All right, let's get to some takeaways. My biggest takeaway, honestly, is that this team still can get so much better than they are right now. That sounds kind of crazy to say about a 9-0 team because, this team's 9-0 for the first time since 2012. Third time ever in program history that they're undefeated through 9 games. So really impressive, but I look at them and I say they can still get a lot better. And you know where that improvement comes is in the third quarter. Once again, the Ducks were just flat out awful in the third quarter today. We can say that it's not a secret. They came out after the half and had a 3-and-out right away, punted the ball. And they scored 3 points today in the third quarter. Again, going back over the past, so I'll break down the numbers in a sec, but I think it's the past 6 games. They've now scored a combined 6 points in the third quarter, which is just insane for this offense because I don't know what it is, but, they're just lifeless when they come out of the half. And that's usually an area where, pass landing teams have been incredible in that middle 8. Going into the half, they're still good at that aspect. But coming out of the half, they don't have it for whatever reason. It's 28-10 at half today. The offense was explosive, getting whatever it wanted. Dillon Gabriel's picking the secondary apart, really just moving the ball around, doing really, really well. And then you turn to the third quarter and they look like a completely different team. So, that's frustrating for one part. I'm sure fans are frustrated when they see that, but I look at it, I'm naturally kind of a glass half full type of person. I think, man, think how good this team could be if they do figure that out and they do start, getting these third quarters and looking more normal in them. They'd be really pretty impressive. Excuse me. I was diving into some numbers. Check out the stats from the season totals for third quarters, or for quarters in general. There's a scoring breakdown. First quarter, Oregon scored 69 points total. It's nice. Second quarter, they've scored 122 points total. Third quarter, 16 points total this year. Fourth quarter, 74 points. They've got 5 games this year with a scoreless third quarter. That's not who this Oregon team is. For one of the best offenses in the nation, that's not acceptable. Honestly, it can get a ton better, and the Ducks could be a completely dominant team if they turn this around. I mean, you think about some of the scores that they could have if they had even average third quarters. They could even put up 7 points, 10 points. They could really have some blowouts and get a lot of backups in the game as well. But it also, it could spell major trouble down the road if they don't address it. All right, let's get to what I call our quacks of the game. But first, I have to tell you guys about Cherry Bundy, sponsor for our podcast right here. If you have not heard about Cherry Bundy, you need to change that. It's a natural anti-inflammatory supplement with no added sugar, made primarily from tart cherries, which are the highest antioxidant fruit or vegetable in the world. They've got drinks, concentrates, gummies, all aimed at reducing soreness and increasing recovery in athletes. They also contain naturally occurring melatonin that helps improve sleep and support immunity. Cherry Bundy is what's in the locker room at Oregon. That is what the team uses for recovery, which is why we were excited to partner with them to get that message out there. Cherry Bundy usually is used in nearly 500 collegiate and professional sports teams, including every NFL team and 10 out of the past 11 Super Bowl champions. You can find Cherry Bundy products at Amazon or on cherrybundy.com. That's CHERIBUNDI.com. Go get yours today. It's backed by science and certified by champions. All right, let's get to our quacks of the game. I think you have to probably start with Traeshon Holden. That's where I want to start today. He had a career high 149 yards on 6 catches. You talk about next man up mentality with Tez Johnson down. Traeshon really stepped up. I think he had a very good game. I was curious to see what he was going to do in this game, and especially last game as well, just kind of after his whole, suspension fall on the Ohio State debacle where he spit on the Ohio State player. He obviously missed that game against Purdue the next week, and then he played a little bit last week against Illinois, but not much. And then obviously he had to have a bigger role in this game with Tez out from the first drive on, and he made the most of it. I thought he played really well, and he's going to continue to have to be a much bigger player, have a much bigger role, I should say, in this offense for as long as Tez is out. Also highlight Evan Stewart, if not for his stats, just kind of his spectacular play alone. He had that unreal touchdown catch that got called back. One of the, I think I would say one of the best touchdown catches I've ever seen. That's kind of like one of those, if you see that happen in the NFL on a Sunday, that's a highlight reel catch that just gets played over and over all year. It was one of those level catches. Obviously got called back because of the illegal man downfield, but let's not let that make us forget about the catch. He also had the touchdown that wasn't a touchdown that got called a touchdown that was really, it was a nice catch, quote unquote, not really a catch, but that back shoulder throw, really impressive. In the end, he had only 3 catches for 16 yards and a touchdown, but it was a really great showing. Another vintage Jordan James game, 117 yards and a touchdown. Noah Whittington, 2 touchdowns, just 36 yards on the ground, but he looked really good again. Dillon Gabriel should highlight he's only 1 touchdown away from Case Keenum's all-time career touchdown record. He had 294 yards, 1 touchdown. He added 23 yards on the ground with a touchdown as well. Defensively, Kobe Savage and Bryce Betcher led the way. They had 7 tackles each. They played really well. I mentioned Jordan Birch. He looked really good coming back from that knee injury, which is just a great sign for this offense or this defense. Surprisingly, no sacks, but they did get 7 tackles for loss. So I thought that was really impressive. All right, let's look forward. Should mention that, the game of the day was Ohio State versus Penn State. Those are really good. Precursor to the Oregon game. I thought it was a fun watch. Ohio State ended up winning that one. It was 20-13. My biggest takeaway is that the Buckeyes were clearly the better team in that game. Penn State got out to that 10-0 lead. They had a really nice first drive of the game, drove all the way down the field. Ohio State's defense buckled up and forced just a field goal. And then Will Howard had the pick 6 on the next drive. So Penn State, jumped out 10-0, but I don't think it wasn't because of the offense, obviously. I think Ohio State's defense was the story of this game. They had that goal line stand. I think Penn State late in the game had a 1st and goal from the 3-yard line, and Ohio State held them. So that was really, really impressive. I think it's worth noting that Ohio State seems to have figured out their offensive line a little bit. I know that was a question coming into this game because they lost their left tackle, Josh Simmons, in the Oregon game, and they looked not very good against Nebraska with just like 64 rushing yards against Nebraska. So they did a lot better on that front today. I think that's probably something you don't want to see if you're a Duck fan or a fan of anyone else in the Big Ten. But that, it is what it is. Credit to them. They've got some depth, and, like Oregon at the start of the year, they moved some pieces around and were able to figure it out. So as it stands now, Oregon and Indiana are the only remaining undefeated teams in the Big Ten. Indiana plays Ohio State in 2 weeks, so we'll kind of see what happens there. If I were to put money on that right now, I would say Ohio State, because I don't think Indiana has really been tested yet this year. Depending on the outcome of that game and assuming that Oregon can remain undefeated, the Ducks will likely play the winner of that game in the Big Ten championship game. I need to dive into all of the tiebreakers and stuff because assuming Ohio State wins that game, there would be a 3-way tie for second place. We need to figure out who Oregon would be or who Oregon would play. But you'd think, off the top of my head, Ohio State would have tiebreakers over Penn State and Indiana for head-to-head records. So you'd think they'd play the winner of that game, but I need to confirm. At this point, I think if you're an Oregon fan, you'd probably rather play Indiana in the Big Ten title game. Just because, like I said, Indiana hasn't really been tested. They've played precisely nobody this year. I don't think they have a ranked win on their schedule, if I'm being completely honest. I need to double check that. But they feel beatable. All credit to Kurt Signetti and what he's doing there in Bloomington. But it feels like a really nice story, kind of like Illinois, that someone's going to snuff out. I think Ohio State will snuff it out in a couple weeks. Ohio State's good. If you're Oregon, you can beat them because you have, they're a different team than they were. Oregon will be a different team than they were back in October. So that will be interesting to see. I think that's probably what we can expect. If I had to put money on any matchup for the Big Ten title game, it would be Oregon versus Ohio State, which would be, a lot of fun. I think that first game between them was so entertaining that I think, everyone would sign up for a part 2 of that. All right. That's going to do it for us today. Thank you guys for tuning in. Again, if you're listening, go subscribe to the show, rate, review, do all of that stuff to help us grow our audience. Again, Jay Stu could not join me tonight. He was not going to be on these weekend shows with me, but we'll be back with him next week on Tuesday. We'll get his thoughts on the Michigan game. Hopefully, have some injury updates on Tez and Marcus. Maybe not, probably not. I have a feeling, like I said, that Dan is probably going to keep this one a little bit closer to the chest. So I don't know what we will know about Tez, but we'll see. You can check out more of my work at DucksWired at usatoday.com. Follow me at Zachary C. Neal on Twitter. Follow Jay Stu on Twitter at Jonathan StuR1. And make sure to check out the Believe in Panthers podcast and the Stu and Crew podcast. For myself, Zach Neal, for my co-host, Jonathan Stewart, we'll talk to you guys next week. Until then, take it easy.